I kept thinking, like, I cannot possibly be the human that like found the formula for supersonic passenger flight.
Yeah.
And it can't possibly be as simple as,
this new plane can fly from New York City to London in under 4 hours without an audible sonic boom. 52 years ago, the US government banned commercial supersonic travel because of the noise disturbances it caused. Sonic booms are loud, like 110 decibels loud, the same volume as a thunderclap or an explosion. But last month, a brand new plane called the XB-1 made history. Supersonic speed without an audible sonic boom. Instead of projecting a massive boom towards the ground, they did something that no one has ever done before. This innovation, in combination with the potential for cheaper tickets, could usher in the return of supersonic travel. And that is a very big deal for bringing back supersonic planes that you and I could actually fly in. So I flew to the Mojave Desert to sit down with Blake, their CEO, for an exclusive interview, and also to see the history-making plane up close. I'm so excited to share this with you. I am so excited to be here with you. This is truly like one of the coolest places that we've ever filmed an interview, so thanks so much for having us.
thank you for coming out. I know you endured a long subsonic flight to get here.
I know, dude, where's Supersonic?
Oh, we got to hurry up and get this thing done.
Yeah, well, it looks pretty great. I gotta say, like, I watched the test flight, but actually seeing it in person is pretty surreal. You said that the first time you ever went on this plane was actually after the test flight.
That's right. Like, I always wanted to climb in it, but I'm like, I don't want to be like that CEO that thinks the rules doesn't apply to him.
Yep.
And we say you can't be in the airplane unless you got a reason to be on the airplane. But I just got in there and played around with it.
I love
but
that.
after it landed for the last time, I got in there and I was like a toddler at an airplane museum, like, woo, you know.
Yeah, that's like a good first principle, which I feel like is a lot of how you run your company,
Yeah.
especially because honestly, like for how much you guys are doing, the team is pretty small. And you've talked about that a lot. Like a lot of people think of Boom as like maybe like the SpaceX of aviation. What's like the parallel? Like how do you think about building a team and how you guys
Yeah,
achieve
we
this?
took a lot of inspiration from SpaceX, and like, frankly, if it hadn't been for SpaceX, I probably never would have started the company. Elon was this like internet guy who like put stuff in orbit, and I remember thinking, well, geez, I'm an internet guy, and like probably supersonic jets are easier than space launch. I'm not sure they are, but that was my original thought, and so it sort of gave me some of the inspiration to start. But one of the things I've come to believe is, small, really high quality teams can do things that the big guys either can't do or might not even try to do. So this airplane was done by 50 people, 50 men and women, including the engineers that designed it, the techs that put it together, the program managers that were the helping organize it, and the pilots that flew it. 50 people. And if this were done at a big company, it'd probably be like 5,000 people.
Yeah, and it probably would not get done in nearly the amount of time.
And an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah, true. Okay, wait, why do you think it's harder than launching rockets into space?
Safety. So the first 3 SpaceX rockets blew up. And it was okay because nobody was on board. But we put a human on XB-1 on all the flights. And why? Because this is an airliner that we're building. It carries people. We have to learn how to do it safely. And safety is really, really hard. When there are people on board, failure is not an option. And that means an enormous amount of care needs to go into testing, an enormous amount of engineering into making everything reliable and redundant. And this thing breaks, there's a backup system and a backup system to the backup system.
Yeah, interesting. All right, we're gonna get back there because I think there's a lot to cover on safety and test flights. But first, I just want to start with kind of like take me into your world. This is a technology that came out a very long time ago, and then the Concorde, which was really our like commercial supersonic flight, was retired like 20 years ago. What made you feel like this was a moment to bring supersonic back, and then what was the roadmap to do it? Well,
I didn't sort of start with that conclusion. I sort of started with the assumption that probably wasn't.
Okay.
But to tell you a little bit of my story, so I'm a software guy by training, went to school for computer science. I went to Amazon in 2001 when my family thought it was a bookstore.
Yep.
They couldn't understand what they thought. Dude, we got you a computer science degree. Why do you want to work retail?
Yeah.
But I was lucky to be there, and so I'm living in Seattle, working at Amazon, and I go tour one of the Concordes that have been retired to the Seattle Museum of Flight.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, this is the most amazing airliner ever made. Why is it in a museum when there's nothing better in the skies? And so I put at that day, I basically said, okay, I want to fly supersonic at some point in my life. And I put a Google alert on supersonic jet because I figured somebody's got to be doing this. And I want to be first to buy a ticket.
Okay.
And so I just watched it for 10 years and nothing.
10 years.
10 years. Nothing was happening. There was some talk about a supersonic private jet.
Okay.
It's like, great. The problem with Concorde was this is a $20,000 ticket.
Yeah.
unaffordable. It's like royalty and rock stars.
Yeah. And very small seats.
And very, small royalty and small rock stars.
Yeah, no NBA players are getting on this plane.
No, this is not an NBA transport, not at all. And so, but okay, now it's going to be 120 million.
Yeah.
If you want to get one, like, okay, I'm never going to have that.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
So why is no one picking up where Concorde left off, solving the biggest problem, which was it was too expensive?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I have no background for this, but I was flying small airplanes for fun.
Yeah.
I loved flight, and I didn't want to be 80 and look backwards and think, what if I'd had the courage?
Love that.
So I thought, okay, I got to look at it. I want to understand for myself why no one's doing supersonic, and then I can confidently move on to my next idea.
Love it.
And instead what I found was there was no good reason. And the internet was full of a bunch of claims that didn't add up.
Interesting.
Like people would say, oh, the only thing that matters in air travel is cost, and people will always buy the cheapest ticket, and nobody will pay more for speed. Like, wait a minute, that can't be right.
Yeah, categorically not true.
People pay more for a direct flight than a connecting flight. People pay more to fly in first class than the back of the airplane. And internationally, some people pay top dollar for a flying bed because they hate the length of the flight and they want to sleep through it.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that was the original idea.
Okay.
What if we traded, what if we could make a supersonic seat at the same price as a business class bed?
Okay.
It took 2 weeks to have that idea.
Yep.
And then the next question was, well, how much would we have to do better versus 1960s technology?
Nice.
And
what year is this about?
This is 2014.
Yeah.
And this is like me in my basement in California with a spreadsheet.
Yes.
And
post-acquisition, you're like involved with Groupon. To give people context.
Yeah. So I sold my first company to Groupon.
Yep.
My first company, it's like the least important thing you could possibly do.
I thought it was kind of cool.
Well, thank you. That's very generous of you. But we made a barcode scanning game.
Yeah.
And like,
that's fun.
It's like, sure, it was fun, but like, it's like if you wanted to like do something for the world, it's like about the least important thing you could possibly do.
Okay.
And then so I went up one level to Internet Coupon.
Nice.
And I'm like, why am I doing this? I wanted to work on something that would matter.
Yeah.
So I was kind of looking at everything I might do through the lens of like how meaningful would it be if it succeeded? How happy would I be if it succeeded? And one of the things I've come to believe is if you're going to start a company and you're ambitious at all, you're going to run at your personal red line. And like every founder I talk to is like this. I don't know if you experience this too with what you do.
Yeah.
Like if it gets easier, I find a way to make it harder.
Totally.
So no matter what I'm doing, I'm going to be at that red line, and that red line's going to feel the same.
Yeah.
So why don't I do something I love?
Love that.
Right. So I thought, okay, like wait a minute. Okay, we got to do less than 10% better than Concorde, designed 50 years ago.
Yeah.
With slide rules, drafting paper, and wind tunnels and military converted engines. Like, can we not find 10%?
Yeah.
And so at that point, I'm like, I got to learn this space. So I started reading textbooks, took remedial calculus and physics because I hadn't had any since high school.
Wow.
Took an airplane design class and I kept thinking like I cannot possibly be the human that like found the formula for supersonic passenger flight, and it can't possibly be as simple as trade the bed for a seat.
Yeah.
Like, it's really that simple. Like, how could it be that simple? How could I be the guy with the idea? But so the first like couple of years, I would think every day, today's the day I find the bug in the spreadsheet. Like the math was just wrong because it couldn't possibly be. But I think we know by now if the math was wrong.
Totally. Yeah, and I remember when the Concorde was retired, a lot of it was actually because of the cost to upkeep it. Like the planes were old, and I remember like British Airways had like seen cracks in the wings and stuff. So it wasn't really, because there was also the crash. But it seems like it wasn't a safety issue as the main reason why we banned it or retired it.
Yeah. I mean, people remember the crash, and a lot of people remember it as, oh, the airplane crashed, and then it went away.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it crashed once in 27 years of flying, which for a 1960s design is actually good. Would not be considered good today.
Interesting.
And then they brought it back into service, and then September 11th happened. Air travel demand collapsed. So something that was already economically challenged was now under more economic challenge. And I think what actually happened was Air France, so there are only two airlines flying, Air France and British Airways. Air France wanted to kill it. So they called their friends at Airbus who was making the spare parts, and they said, it'd be nice if you stopped making spare parts. Because then we could like stop and like blame somebody else.
Interesting.
So that's what my understanding is that's what happened. And so it forced British Airways out as well. And but the reality is the thing was dead on arrival.
The plane was.
The plane was, yeah. Because, okay, it's 100 uncomfortable seats.
Yep.
$20,000 a ticket.
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. And it definitely didn't make any sense in the 1970s when like there was a lot less travel and a lot less premium travel. You just can't fill 100 seats.
How many do they normally fill?
Well, so today air travel is, like Boeing makes like 3 class airplanes, right? So you've got like first or business up front, then you've got some premium, and then you've got some economy.
Yeah.
And they sort of kind of try to manage to fill the whole airplane with those separate classes. But if you look at the size of the cabins, the higher the fare, the smaller the seats.
Yeah.
And of course, because the more expensive something is, the fewer the people who are going to buy it.
Yeah.
Right? And so a normal business class cabin, for these flatbed seats we have today, imagine a round trip fare around $5,000.
Okay.
And there are somewhere between 40 and 80 seats on the airplane, depending on kind of what airline and what route.
Yeah.
Versus, so Concorde's got 100 seats and $20,000. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right? So for us to succeed, what we have to do is bring down the cost of the ticket and then put the right number of seats. And so we're aiming, ultimately I want to do this for everybody.
I love
But we're starting, it's very much like Tesla. Like Tesla built the Roadster and then the Model S and the Model 3, and now they're going to do a $25,000 something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, that's the Roadster.
Love that.
Right?
Okay,
that's
a
the
great
Roadster.
comparison.
And Overture is the Model S. It's not for everybody, but it's for a lot.
Yeah.
Anybody who can fly business class can fly on Overture. And then there's going to be an Overture 2 and an Overture 3. And I want to get to the point where like supersonic flight's a lot less exciting because it's just how we all fly.
Oh, I love that take so much. Yeah, totally agree. Interesting. That's also, you're in an interesting relationship where you're selling to the actual airlines, like United or American. So they're probably the ones ultimately pricing it.
Yes.
But are you thinking that they should price it around $5K
Well,
a ticket?
yeah, the pricing's up to the airlines.
Yeah.
But what we all know is the lower the cost, the bigger the opportunity, right? So we get up every day and we say, how do we optimize the airplane such that it's a great experience, but it's also affordable? So to just give you an example of the numbers, New York, London round trip, break even with about 80% of the seats full, which is kind of average about what it is today, it's $3,500. So if it's $3,501, they made $1, right? And at a $5,000 fare, they're making a lot of money.
Yeah.
So what we think about is how to get the $3,500 down.
Yeah.
Right, and then the airlines can price it however they want to price it. The reality is, when this first comes to market, and we've only built a handful, they're going to be full every flight at like
it's so
astronomical fares. And I think that's why United was so smart to go first, because when they're the only ones flying these things, they're going to have this like incredible, like everyone's going to switch to United, and then the fares are going to be stratospheric, and like those airplanes are going to pay for themselves in like a year.
Interesting. Yeah, because right now, New York to London is like 7 hours. This would be 3.5.
Yep.
How long would a flight have to be for it to make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so if it's not, so when you take off, you don't like instantly go supersonic, right?
Fair.
It takes maybe 20 minutes to get to supersonic. And then on the arrival end, you got to descend and slow down and land, and that takes, I don't know, 20 minutes.
Okay.
And so the whole flight's got to be long enough that it's worth the acceleration.
Interesting.
The shortest flight that probably makes sense, something like San Francisco to Honolulu.
Okay.
Right? Where today that is like maybe 6 hours, 5-6 hours, and we could do it in like 2.5 or 3.
Okay.
Which, by the way, what that means is you can work all day Friday in San Francisco, go to the airport, fly to Hawaii, and be sipping a Mai Tai on the beach at sunset the same day.
That's unreal.
Right?
Yeah.
I so want to do that.
Love that. Yeah, and so for a lot of our videos, I'll fly to locations. So we've probably been on like 30 flights this year, and you lose so much time on the plane.
So much time.
Like even if you're level 11 productive and Wi-Fi is getting better with Starlink, it's still different to be in person.
Yeah. And most people wouldn't do what you're doing, right? Most people are like, oh, it's too far, I'll do it on Zoom, and it's just not as good.
Yeah.
And that's people think that speed's about saving time, and sometimes it is, but speed is the difference between going and not going in many cases. Like Hawaii, nobody went before jets. It was like 16 hours from the West Coast, literally on a flying boat. Like tens of thousands of people went every year.
Yeah. And
right?
now millions.
Now, like probably tens of millions go.
Yeah.
Because not the sound barrier, but the time barrier.
Love that. Where do you think regulation goes next? Like NASA is working on a supersonic plane as well with a very different design, but the government, like the US government banned supersonic travel over land because of the sonic boom. You guys just had a very successful test flight with no audible sonic boom, which I want to talk about, but what are the next steps to actually getting regulators to be on board?
Yeah, so right now when it comes to regulation or politics, like everybody disagrees. but everyone agrees on one thing.
Okay.
Which is it's stupid to have a speed limit in the skies.
Yeah.
Like everybody agrees on that. Like my least favorite regulation, 14 CFR 91.817.
Okay.
I know this by heart.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
By the way, its days are numbered. Says thou shalt not exceed the speed of sound.
Wow.
And what it should say is thou shalt not make bad noises.
Yeah.
And you can argue about what's bad or what's not, but I'm pretty sure no sonic boom is not bad. That's
agreed.
uncontroversial.
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic this is going to get fixed. Especially now that we've proven, not once, not twice, but actually 6 times we've broken the sound barrier. We've had microphones turned on, no boom.
Yeah. And is it because of the way that you've engineered the wings, or is it the altitude that you're flying at? Is it a combination of both?
It has actually very little to do with the airplane itself.
Okay.
And so the NASA thing you're referring to is a completely different approach to this. And this one I think is simpler, and it's also just much more obvious because it's totally silent.
Okay.
What happens is the boom makes a U-turn in the atmosphere and it never hits the ground.
Yeah.
So, okay, how does that happen?
Yeah.
We've probably all seen that, elementary or middle school science experiment where there's a glass of water and you can drop a pencil on the glass of water, right? And it looks broken.
Yeah.
Why does it look broken?
The light's refracting.
Well, it's refracting, right? And why does the light refract? Well, when the speed of light in water is not the same as speed of light in air.
Yep.
And the light refracts towards lower speeds of light. And you can almost think of it as like you're driving a car. Now imagine the wheels on the right-hand side of the car are moving faster than the ones on the left. You're going to turn to the left. You turn towards the lower speed.
Yeah.
So waves turn just like a car would. So light refracts when it goes through different places where the speed of light is different. Well, sound's the same thing. Sound curves towards lower speeds of sound. The speed of sound is not constant.
Yeah.
The speed of sound is a function of temperature. Cold up high, warm down low. That means low speed up high, high speed down low. So the boom turns upward.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it makes kind of a U shape. Now, to get it to not hit the ground requires that it come off the airplane at the right angle.
Yep.
And that the airplane be high enough that the bottom of the U never touches the ground. So you got to be able to break the sound barrier high.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to control the angle such that all the geometry works. And you need a computer to calculate this because the way it curves varies with the weather. Like if it's if the temperature gradient is different than how it normally is, the speed you can do this at is a little bit different. So you got to have a computer to calculate it.
Okay.
You got to have good weather data, and you got to have an engine that enables you to break the sound barrier sufficiently high.
Yeah.
And also to be able to fly at that speed efficiently for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Concorde didn't have any of those things.
Yep.
Right. In fact, they could put it in this condition, but they couldn't predict for sure whether they were going to be there. The engines at these speeds were very inefficient, and so they couldn't make it across the country without running out of gas. So they didn't have the engine power, they didn't have the efficiency, they didn't have the computers, they didn't have the weather data.
It's a lot of things not to have.
Right.
Yeah.
But we got all those things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And there they are.
Yeah. And so when you guys did the first test flight, going back to the safety stuff, obviously it was successful and amazing. I'm curious how you were able to test in advance to know that it would kind of go well, and what the feeling was like day of.
Right. So the incredible amount of care and diligence went into that. Everything we could test on the ground, we tested on the ground.
Okay.
So all high-speed taxi test, all the way to getting the nose off the ground, letting it come back down at near takeoff speeds.
Okay.
To testing the hydraulics and testing the hydraulics with some of the hardware broken. Everything we could test on the ground.
What did you guys break? What types of?
Oh, we would purposely disable stuff and then see how the rest of it worked. Or the landing gear. When you gotta land, the landing gear needs to be down. When you're flying up high, it needs to be up.
Yeah.
So it needs to be up when it needs to be up. It needs to be down when it needs to be down.
Yeah.
And these things can't mix. And so there's not only is there a dual redundant gear extension hydraulic system. There's an engine-driven hydraulic pump. There's a backup electric hydraulic pump, and then there's a third system. That's called a blowdown. And, and it's a nitrogen bottle. And if the gear won't come down, the pilot has a little knob to turn, and it puts compressed gas through the hydraulic system. It forces the gear down, and we tested that it's strong enough to push the doors out of the way, even if the doors are closed.
Okay.
And they're explosive bolts. You can blow the explosive bolts to open the doors up. So you don't put any of that on a rocket that's not carrying a person.
Yeah, of course.
And so we tested all of that. We'd done literally hundreds of gear swings. We take the airplane in the hangar, we put it up on jacks, and whoop, 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 I was like, okay, we're pretty sure it works. And so so when we go to fly for the first time, first off, every flight we only test one thing at a time. So we don't take off and like go supersonic on the first flight.
Yeah.
The first flight was about, can we take off and land?
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
And in fact, the gear never even goes up on the first flight.
Interesting.
So human flight test is one test point at a time.
Okay.
And there are a couple dozen engineers on the ground watching thousands of signals that come off the airplane and looking, is it what we expect? Is it what we expect? Is it different?
Yeah.
And they're, only when the test plane clears a test point successfully does it go to the next one. So and this is how you do it safely.
Yeah.
One step at a time, confirm you're all good, then the next step. So it took us 12 flights from the first flight to the first time we broke the sound barrier.
Wow.
And there are certain things you can only learn in the air.
Like what types of things did you guys learn in the air?
So the thing that surprised us on first flight, the airplane flew exactly like we predicted.
Okay.
But the way it felt to the pilot was different than what we
Oh
predicted.
yeah, Jeff was saying this. Okay.
Yeah. So the pilot was experiencing like, it feels like hard to control and roll.
Yeah.
And at first we thought, our aerodynamic predictions were all wrong. But it turned out the way it felt for the pilot to be rolling was not what we thought it would be. And it made it feel worse than it actually was. And it made it easy for the pilot to over control the airplane.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So it's like, oh, okay. So what we did was we put a digital stability augmentation system on roll.
Interesting.
And we did that probably faster than anyone's ever done it. It took just like a few months.
Wow.
From like, we think we should do this to, okay, it's on the airplane, it works, let's go fly it again.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's like the power of a small team and just having absolute killers. Like, I feel like you've talked about a lot, like small team but excellent people is so much more effective than big team but not excellent people.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of people are like SpaceX or Boeing. Why do you think like Boeing or Airbus hasn't tried to do supersonic?
It's business, not technical. Like everything that we need to build a supersonic jet is on the 787 20 years ago.
Wow.
Like in a certain sense, Boeing invented all the technology for this. We didn't.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, this is a supersonic jet made out of 787 technology.
Okay, I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
And like in a certain sense, we didn't invent anything.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't Boeing do it?
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Boeing makes 3-class airplanes. There's business, premium, economy, right? Now, today, we don't have the technology to make an affordable 300-seat supersonic jumbo. We can do it at a business class fare.
Yeah.
We can't yet do it at an economy fare. We're at the like Model S level of technology, right?
You can't fit enough seats?
No, you can make it big, but the fuel efficiency and other operating economics aren't good enough that you could afford
like a $300 seat.
Yeah, you couldn't do it for $300. It would be like $3,000.
Yeah.
And you can't fill 300 seats at $3,000.
Yeah.
Right? It's that whole economic trade we were talking about before. So what we're doing is we're starting with the front of the airplane. First, it's all business, and then we'll have business and premium, and then we'll have everybody.
Nice.
And so if you're Boeing, well, that's not how your airplanes work.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, the seats that are in business class today are something like 20% of the seats, but they are half the revenue, and they're about 80% of the profit. Wow. So if you take those seats out and you put them on a different airplane, it's economically unbalanced.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so okay, if Boeing built Overture, they'd sell fewer Dreamliners, or they'd have to reduce the price of the Dreamliners.
Yeah.
Right? So okay, most big companies don't have the courage to do something like that. And if you're in a very competitive market, okay, well, someone's going to do it, so I guess I'd better do it, otherwise I'm toast.
Yeah.
But there are only 2 companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Only 2
good
companies,
point.
right? And so if you look at every product Boeing makes, Airbus has a carbon copy.
Yeah.
Why did Boeing do the 787 MAX? Well, Airbus did the A320neo, and they needed to copy it, right? The 787 and the A350 are like basically the same airplane. And so it's not a competitive market.
Yeah.
And so they've got no reason to like take a risk.
It's interesting too because it's kind of like the paradox of success, where once you find success in one thing, to then innovate and maybe lose that feels risky. But when you're a new company, you can come in and you don't have anything to lose.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think also people completely misestimate risk. Like sometimes I get asked, like, I don't know if you get this, why would you do something so risky to go out on your own and like, not have a boss, not have a paycheck?
And it doesn't really feel risky at all.
It doesn't feel risky at all. So why doesn't it feel risky?
I feel like you just assume it's going to work out, or you'll pivot a way to make it happen. And also, there's always a way to make it a win. I feel like you learn and then you can.
I completely agree with that. And then the other thing I would add to it is, for me, the biggest risk of all is spending my life not finding my limits and not having done things I loved.
Yeah.
So that's really risky.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather do boom and fail than not try.
I love that.
But that's not the mindset of I think another dimension here is all of the companies that we think of as like the big airplane companies today, Boeing, Lockheed, Douglas, the companies that went together and became Airbus, they're all founded in a golden age.
Oh, interesting.
They all were created between 1903, when the Wright brothers flew, and 1921, when Douglas was founded.
Interesting.
And then there was a century of zilch. Zilch. And so if you look at what happened, the introduction of the first jetliner, and the first jetliner was the de Havilland Comet, made in the UK.
Okay.
And it was made while de Havilland was still running de Havilland.
Yeah.
The founder was still in charge. So, but the 1960s, as we went into the jet age, coincides perfectly with the retirement of the founders. So these companies go through life cycles.
Yeah.
They're the people who created them, and us founders, we are our own flavor of ice cream, right?
Yeah.
But like, we want to keep doing better and better and better and better, and we're not afraid. We're not afraid to like mess up what we did last because we want to make the next better thing. Steve Jobs wasn't afraid to like destroy the iPod by building the iPhone.
Yeah.
But so then what happened? So the founders leave, and then they've got the people who work with the founders.
Okay.
And then they leave, and then you've got the accountants.
Yeah.
And like literally like the last Boeing CEO was an accountant.
Oh, interesting.
And so it turned into this like financial optimization. The CEOs didn't hang around for very long, and they had this sort of philosophy of let's optimize for the next quarter financial results.
Yeah.
And so some people say like Boeing, like the reason we had these crashes was because they were too focused on money.
Okay.
And I don't think it's quite true.
What do you think it is?
They were focused on money in the wrong way. Because like the killing people in your product led to like the biggest financial disaster ever at Boeing.
Yeah.
But it made a few quarters look good, and then it like was a total disaster.
Yeah.
And so the problem is not focusing on money. The problem is focusing on short-term money. And if you think long-term, then doing the right thing for your passengers and doing the right thing for safety and doing the right thing for your shareholders are all the same thing.
Agree.
All the same thing. Build a great, safe product.
Agree. Yeah.
But by the way, when the CEOs leave every couple years,
really hard.
It's like, I'll optimize for now. The next guy will deal with it.
So is that what's happening? Like because we've seen like a huge increase in these plane crashes. Is it that the vehicles are just not tested as well? Like, why do you think?
Well, I don't think it's correct. We've seen a huge increase in plane crashes.
Maybe a huge increase in coverage of the plane crashes.
Oh, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
So there's this paradox of safety. So the automobile accidents in the U.S., just the U.S., the deaths we have in car crashes are the equivalent of a 737 completely full going down every 48 hours.
Yeah, it's insane.
And it's like the roads are just utter carnage. Yeah. And we don't talk about it because if we did, we couldn't talk about anything else.
Yeah, we'd have to like change society.
That's right. But the most dangerous part of flying is driving to the airport.
Yeah.
And so airplanes have gotten so safe that even a small hiccup is newsworthy, and it creates this perception that they're unsafe. But the worst thing you should do is drive instead of flying.
Yeah, I remember you actually said in an interview that you thought the increase in airport security may have actually led to an increase in people dying because people would decide not to take shorter flights and drive instead.
Anything that pushes people from airplanes to cars is deadly.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
But we know what we can do better. And by the way, I don't want to be dismissive of like the crazy stuff that's happened lately. Like that crash around DC was 100% preventable. A tragedy, 100% preventable. And we keep seeing these near misses. I think because the system has gotten really busy and the technology's not kept up. Like we need to add. We've got 1960s air traffic control. We need 2020s air traffic control.
What types of updates would you make?
I mean, it's a very detailed question that I have to get close to give you a really good answer.
Okay.
But just to give you an example, I believe in the DC crash a few weeks ago, the airplane was the airliner was equipped with something called TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System, which has been required. That and the data that feeds it have been required in every civil airplane for 10 years or so now. Okay. Well, the helicopter was this military thing that was somehow exempted from that, and if it had met the same requirement, both pilots would have gotten a traffic alert, and it would have said traffic, like turn right, descend. Yeah. And then pilots are trained like when you hear that, you just do what it says. Yeah. Because the computer tells you how not to run into something. Yeah. So like, we didn't put the technology we even already had on all the airplanes that mattered. So like, that's the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, that's crazy actually. And I think the increase in like media coverage has also maybe made people very concerned about flying. I think media in general is a very interesting topic, and it's actually how you and I connected. I sent a cold email being like, I love a lot of social media, but sometimes I feel like they miss the bigger picture of what's going on in technology when like
Right.
we're in the most exciting time ever.
That's
and you
right.
need people to feel optimistic.
You wrote a great cold email, by the way.
Thanks.
Like I get junk cold emails, but some people I can tell when people have actually tried, and I really try to respond to all the cold emails, the good cold emails.
Yeah, no, you responded in like 4 minutes and made my entire night. I was stoked.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because I think it's like we're in the coolest time ever, and we need people to feel like the future is going to get better and not worse if they're going to commit to building it.
Right.
It's just like a weird relationship.
No, I think you said that very, very well. Like, sometimes people get nostalgic for like the good old days.
Yeah.
And when someone's doing that, I say, okay, at what place in time in history would you most want to live? Do you want to live in like 1900 with a pot-bellied stove? Do you want to live before antibiotics? Do you want to live before air conditioners?
Yeah.
Do you want to live before the internet or cell phones?
Yeah.
And you usually be like, oh, I actually want to live like right here, right now is like really where I want to be.
Yes.
And like so the only place better is the future.
Love that take. Yeah,
right?
I agree.
But the future's not automatically better. And aviation and aerospace, I think, are these like really interesting case studies because for the most part, the world has gotten much better. Healthcare has gotten better. Standards of living have gotten better. Poverty has gone down dramatically in the last 100 years. And yet, in 1969, we could fly supersonic and land on the moon.
Yeah.
And now we can't.
Yeah.
Like, WTF?
Yeah, agree. Do you think that it's going to happen like in the next 5 to 10 years? Because it feels like you guys have a lot of momentum right now.
I mean, if it doesn't, it'll be because we screwed it up.
Okay, like we're on the path.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the market is there, the technology is there, the customers want it, airlines want it. Like it's possible to build it with a small team. Like all of those things are true.
Yeah.
And now I feel this like kind of burden of responsibility in a way.
Yeah.
Is if we screw this up, the world will remember what they were, the false lessons that the world learned from Concorde.
Yeah.
The world learned all these false lessons from Concorde that caused nobody to try for a long time. And so if like we screw this up, like, geez, will it be another 50 years before anyone tries again?
Yeah, which is
and
insane.
so I can't screw it up.
Well, also, it's really interesting, too, because Concorde was so long ago, like it was developed in the 1970s, you can't even really ask those people for advice. Like, you've kind of...
Well, I thought that would be true, but it turned out it wasn't.
Oh, okay, tell me.
So the, funny story, so some of them are not around anymore,
Yeah.
but some of them are. So when we brought Boom out of stealth mode in March of 2016.
Okay.
And back then the company was like 15 or 20 people. And so if you go to our website, you hit the contact us, it would go to me.
Love that.
And so I get this contact us and it pops up and it says, hey, I love what you're doing. I'd really like to help. My name is Clive Lehman. If you don't know who I am, Google me.
Wow, that's a killer cold email.
Cold email,
Yeah.
right? And I turned to my CTO and I said, who's Clive Lehman? And he picks this book up off his desk. He's like, Clive Lehman designed Concorde.
I just got chills. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, holy crap, like I need to write a response. And we ended up with a Skype call with Clive.
Wow.
Who it must have been like 80 or 90 at the time and was just full of all this stuff you couldn't read in any book.
Wow. What were some of the lessons that you applied?
What were some of the lessons we applied? I remember the thing I most vividly remember Clive saying, I said, Clive, what's your advice for us?
Okay.
And I thought he would have like a deep thing about, well, here's the thing you would never know about a supersonic intake.
Yeah.
And he said, try to spend less time on it than I did.
Wow.
We took too long.
That's a great take.
It is a great take. But he had other technical things too. Like he looked at the very first design we had for XB1.
Okay.
And he said, that's what you design if you understand high speed, but you don't understand low speed yet.
Oh,
and he was totally right.
Okay.
The first design of XB1 had like super skinny wings, a long pointy nose, a small vertical tail, and it would have flown great at Mach 2 and terrible for takeoff and landing. And so the hard part, design engineering wise, of building this is how to make it go fast efficiently, but how do you make it take off and land in a way the pilots can control that will be safe when it's slow.
Interesting, because it's on the same runway. Like there's no special longer runway, for example, so you need it
Yeah,
to slow down.
we won't want to depend on that. That was one of Concorde's challenges, is it needed an especially long runway.
Yeah.
And we want this to work on runways we already have.
Yeah.
So our rule is if you can land a 777, like a big Boeing, you can land an Overture. And it should take off and land in roughly the same speeds and be very controllable at those speeds and very quiet at those speeds from like an engine noise kind of perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know about supersonic and like it being really fast, but they don't know the specifics. For the Mach 1, Mach 2, could we maybe just do like a quick like breakdown of what that actually means and how that works?
Yeah, so so Mach 1 is the speed of sound.
Yep.
Mach 2 is twice the speed of sound. And the best question that like almost nobody asks is, what in the world does the speed of sound have to do with an airplane?
Yeah, great question.
Right?
Curious answer.
So, okay, what is the speed of sound? The speed of sound is the speed at which pressure waves move in air.
Okay.
Now think about it. Airplanes are all about bumping into air, creating pressure waves, manipulating pressure so they could stay aloft.
Yes.
So subsonic, so if you're less than Mach 1, what it means is the airplane is flying slower than the pressure wave.
Okay.
So imagine we're flying along like this.
Okay.
The nose is bumping into air. And whenever that happens, there's a pressure wave out in front of the airplane.
Okay.
So you can kind of think of it as it's coming and say, hey, something's coming. Get out.
Okay.
Get out of the way, right? And so by the time the airplane bumps into air, it's already started to move out of the way. So it's kind of gentle.
Yes.
Now, if you're going supersonic, what that means is the airplane is outrunning the pressure wave. So it's bumping into air that has not started to move out of the way.
Okay.
So what happens? It compresses.
Yeah.
And that you get these little bands of compressed air. That's what's called shock waves.
Yes.
And when those shock waves kind of stack up on top of each other, that's how you end up with a sonic boom.
Yep.
So the airplane is outrunning the pressure wave. That's it. That's supersonic.
And is it boom boom because it's hitting both parts of the plane, like it's hitting at the front and then it hits again?
Basically, so the front of the airplane's like pointing at the front, pointing at the back, and like fat in the middle, right? So the front of the airplane is compressing.
Okay.
And the back of the airplane is expanding. And so basically all the compression stacks up on top of each other, and you kind of get this spike in pressure, and then on the expansion you get this like drop in pressure, and then it returns to ambient, and so it looks kind of like an in, and people call it an in wave, and it's heard as a boom boom, the one from the peak over pressure, one from the peak under pressure, and then it returns to ambient.
Interesting. Yeah, and what's interesting about that too is when you're on the plane, you can't hear it.
No.
So it's only really affecting the people below before the sonic boom was gotten rid of. Are there other experiences that will be different on a supersonic plane versus a regular plane? Or will it just be fast?
It'll be faster. Sometimes people ask me like, hey, is there like a health issue with going so fast?
Interesting.
And the reality is there's a health issue with sitting for a long time going slow.
True, yeah. Like blood clots.
Blood clots. Like it's not good to sit for long periods of time, right? So speed in that sense is healthy. You don't notice breaking the speed of sound. I've done it now once.
Where on?
Not on this one, unfortunately, but on that one.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so I'm pointing at a T-38 we have in the hangar, which is a fighter trainer that we used to train on before we flew XB-1.
Okay.
And it doesn't go as fast as XB-1, but it does go lightly supersonic.
Okay.
And so having done that, it's completely uneventful. Like apart from watching the Mach meter tick over past 1, you don't feel any different. If anything, it gets smoother.
Yeah, Jeff was saying as a pilot, it's almost anticlimactic because you're expecting it to be like this big monumental moment, but in reality, it's just seeing it on the screen.
That's right. Yeah. So we went and broke the sound barrier. It was a total non-event.
Yeah.
And then we did 3 aileron rolls, 2 barrel rolls, a loop, and that was eventful.
Yeah, that is sick. And I mean, even just
literally. I didn't feel so great after that.
Yeah.
I didn't feel so great after that flight.
Do you have a lot of motion sickness in general, or
no?
But that was a lot, right?
I fly some. The first time I flew in a fighter, I was definitely like I didn't feel well the rest of the day.
Interesting.
Second time it was no problem.
Horrible. Okay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You know, Tom Cruise for some of his movies tried to be in those types of environments. I feel like he'd be really cool to work with on Supersonic.
We should figure that out.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the ideal collab. Are there other people that you're like, they would either be amazing to have like the advisory board, or you would want to bring them in? Because I know Paul Graham's involved.
Yeah, I mean, we've been fortunate to just have like great people involved.
Yeah.
Like we are Paul Graham's biggest investment.
Yeah. Wow. And you said he always comes out at the right moments, right? Like I remember watching an interview where when things are going well, he's like not as active, and then when we really need him, he immediately is there.
Yeah, like PG shows up in the most challenging times.
Yeah.
And I think he and the culture he's created at Y Combinator is this one of just like brutal honesty.
Yeah.
Like when I first met him years ago, he was like, Blake, you don't look the part, you need to lose weight.
Damn.
And he was right, by the way. I was a lot heavier then.
Yeah.
And so he's like completely unafraid to say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I think all humans, but especially us entrepreneurs, like we need to hear that.
Totally agree. Yeah, because it's like ultimately the market will tell you if the people don't, like by them just not investing in the product. What are moments where he's told you things that maybe were hard to hear, but then they made the product better?
His stuff hasn't really been product feedback per se. It's much more about like how do I operate as a founder, or how do I deal with a situation. And I remember in an email thread we were having a few weeks ago before we broke in the sound barrier, and I was trying to figure out really how how to navigate some stuff with the government, and I was asking him for his advice, and he said something like, "I don't know, but you don't know either. You're flying blind. You need to figure out how to get a lot smarter about this."
Wow, that's a smart take.
And it was a totally smart take.
Yeah.
And one of the, when I think about all the advice I get, sometimes I ask for advice and I'm like, okay, I kind of thought that's what you would say.
Yeah.
But that means I didn't learn anything, right? The best advice is surprising, because surprise is what happens when it's not expected or not on your radar. And like a high percentage of I'm not able to predict PG's feedback. It's like almost always surprising, which means that there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of my best friends in New York are also founders, and I feel like the coolest part about it is getting to learn from their experiences too. And I feel like there's a different energy of relentlessness with founders. And as a culture, I think more and more people are becoming founders. A lot of people that watch these videos are starting companies. I watched one of your interviews where you're like, every company is hard, so you may as well pick one that you love. What is other advice that comes to mind for founders?
I think that's far and away the most important advice I have to offer. Startups are hard. Make it worthwhile by picking something you love. And my experience has been that when I did that, I found that I could develop skills I didn't know I had. Yeah. What you already know is irrelevant. If you imagine a successful founder on the day of IPO, right? Or whatever you want to consider that you've made it.
The
moment.
making it moment. Yeah.
What they know on that day about how to run a company and how to build a team and how to sell and how to raise money and how to deal with investors, all that stuff, 99% of it they didn't know when the day they started.
Yeah.
So why not make it 99.5%?
Love that.
And just work on the thing that you love. Totally. And what I found is when I work on something I love, it makes me more magnetic. I can get better people. I can build a team. If I was building a barcode scanning game, let's say,
Random.
It was so hard to get people to want to work for us. It was so hard to get people to want to invest in us. Because I was like, why should this even exist?
Yeah.
Right? And, but when I told people I was building a supersonic passenger jet, there was a little bit of are you crazy?
Yeah.
But if I could convince them the answer was maybe no, then the next question was, how do I get involved and help? Because I want this to work.
Yeah, love it.
And so we got great investors, we got great engineers, and all kinds of people just cheering for us. And that made it possible to do something that otherwise, I think there's this, the more inspiring thing is actually easier, even if on paper it sounds harder, because it's more motivating for the founder and more motivating for the rest of the team.
Yeah, and then you would get absolute killers because ultimately the best people in the world are going to want to devote themselves to really hard problems.
That's right.
Okay, so if everything goes great this year, and we're here 1 year later, what will your year have looked like?
Can I give one other piece of founder
Yes, oh my God, I would love to.
So the second one I would have is there is so much running towards the popular problem. There is a zillion AI companies, and there are a zillion, before there were a zillion photo sharing apps, right?
Yeah.
There's a zillion social networks. A thing I've tried to come for myself is I want to work on things that wouldn't happen unless I did them. If everyone's working on this, I don't want to work on it.
Yeah.
What do I even have to add?
Because it's going to happen anyway.
It's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
What's nobody working on? And
Damn, I love that.
one of the surprising things is the world is full of things that nobody's doing. And oftentimes it's a bystander effect. Why was nobody working on supersonic flight? Yeah. They all assumed it was so obviously good that it was possible somebody would be doing it. Yeah. But the result of all that thinking is nobody's doing it. The bystander effect thinking. So what else is nobody doing? Yeah. And I think there's an art to learning to see problems that other people have accepted as normal. And the world is full of them. The world is full of big problems that no one's working on. My favorite example is traffic. Someone please start a traffic company.
Yeah. I wrote that down about, I think that's one of your most unique attributes is being able to see the gaps in the market and then obsess over them and figure out how to make it better. Are there other areas that you've thought about beyond aviation where you're that is a gap in the market, why is no one doing that?
Oh, there's many, many things.
Traffic is one.
Traffic is one. Healthcare is so screwed up.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's getting addressed in the lowest hanging fruit kinds of ways.
There's a company called Neko Health that's run by the Spotify CEO that is so cool. It's preventative MRIs. And it's only in Europe right now, but it's a $300 MRI and it can track early cancer prevention, diabetes,
neat.
Personalized blood tests.
There's another US startup that does that too.
Yes.
We share some, Pronovo, I
yes,
think?
Yeah.
We share some investors and I got a free MRI. Cool. It was very exciting.
What do you think about it?
I wish I could do it every year.
Yeah.
It wasn't
totally agree.
$300, it was like $3,000.
I know,
So
yeah.
I was like, okay, we need to get the cost down.
Agree, and I feel like Europe healthcare is just better in some ways, so they're actually, I think, gonna come to the US, but we'll see what the pricing is. But to me, like, that is so exciting, and then I had stress fracture my leg recently,
Ooh.
so I got an MRI, and ChatGPT read the MRI for me.
So
and
cool.
I was like, damn, like, that is the future of healthcare, like, getting instantaneous.
Right. Why can't we put AI on the baggage screening machines at airports?
That's a great take, yeah, then you cut down airport security and then people fly more.
Exactly.
All right, well, you were amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I feel like you're inspiring in so many different ways.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Thanks.